Oh, there it is. The car of my youthful dreams.
Mike Brewer's daughter turned 22 years old, and he'd been there for 3 of her birthdays. 3 out of 22. The rest of the time, he was in a different country, sleeping in hotels, buying cars for a television show that made him famous and destroyed his life at the same time. But that's not even the worst part. The worst part is what happened after his co-host walked away in 2017. The abuse that followed wasn't just online. It showed up at his front gate. It targeted his wife. It came for his daughter. And it never stopped. Then, in 2025, after 15 years of running his own dealership, Mike shut it down. 60 jobs gone. And when people asked why, his answer pointed straight at the government. But what really happened to Mike Brewer? The death threats. Let's start with the part of this story that doesn't make any sense unless you've lived it. March 2017. Ed China announces he's leaving Wheeler Dealers after 13 seasons. Production company wants to cut down the workshop segments, the detailed mechanical fixes that made the show what it was. Ed says no. Ed walks. Within days, Mike Brewer's life turned into something out of a nightmare. Death threats. Not one, not a handful. Constant, relentless, daily threats. People didn't just come for Mike. They went after his wife, Michelle. They went after his daughter, Chloe. Strangers on the internet, people who had never met him, never spoken to him, were sending messages saying they were going to sexually assault his wife and daughter, saying they were outside his house. And some of them actually were. Mike has had people show up at his gate. In an interview years later, Mike described what it's like. I wake up every day to a tirade of abuse. It happens every single day. It's killed presenters in the past, poor Caroline Flack. It does hurt, and it does affect me. I can see my changing moods when I've read something particularly disturbing. It affects my mental health. Think about that for a second. A man who fixes cars for a living, a bloke whose job is to buy a knackered Alfa Romeo, get it running, and sell it on, is receiving the kind of abuse usually reserved for war criminals. And it's not anonymous trolls hiding in the shadows. Mike has been abused to his face. In the street, in restaurants, in supermarkets, at car shows. People walk up to him and scream abuse because Ed China left a television program. 6 days after Ed announced his departure, he released another video. This one wasn't about the show. It was about Mike. Ed explained that Mike had rung him over the weekend to tell him what was happening, that not only Mike, but his wife and daughter were receiving significant online abuse, including death threats. Ed said plainly, "That's really not cool." But here's where it gets messy. Mike, in the heat of it all, fired back on social media. In a now-deleted tweet, he wrote, "Ed left," and didn't say, "Yes, you're right. I'm still pulling the knife from my back." The tweet vanished quickly, but the damage was done. The internet latched onto it. Mike, grieving the loss of his co-host, defending himself against a wave of hatred, had just given the mob more ammunition. And the abuse didn't stop. Not after a week. Not after a month. Mike's wife Michelle posted a screenshot in mid-2023, years after Ed left, showing the kind of daily abuse Mike was still receiving. Her caption, "This is the kind of daily abuse that someone in the public eye has to endure every day. This is totally unacceptable, and social media companies now need to make everyone accountable." 3 years. The same hatred, the same threats. For a car show. Mike himself has been blunt about how he feels about social media. In a 2023 interview, he said, "I hate it. I wish I could switch it off tomorrow and never go back there again. Because people out there, they're sick. People out there are depraved. It's very dark. I'd get it if I were a murderer or I'd done something heinous, but I'm just a guy who fixes up cars. I just don't understand why people would abuse somebody over that." Here's the question nobody in the comments section seems to ask: what did Mike Brewer actually do wrong? The split. What actually happened with Ed China? Most people think they know why Ed China left. Almost nobody does. The story that spread across the internet was simple. Mike Brewer pushed Ed China out. Mike wanted to be the star. Mike didn't care about the cars. Mike betrayed his mate. None of that is true, but once it's out there, it sticks. Here's what actually happened. Wheeler Dealers had been running since 2003. By 2017, the show had moved to America, filming in California for 6 months of the year. The production company Velocity wanted to speed things up. They thought Ed's detailed workshop segments were too difficult to film, too time-intensive, too expensive. They wanted to cut them down. Reduce the mechanical detail, make the show faster. Ed disagreed. He felt the corners he was being asked to cut compromised the quality of his work and would erode his integrity. So he left. That's it. That's the whole story. A mechanic disagreed with the direction his employer wanted to take, and he quit. Mike saw it differently. He'd been managing the stress of living in California for 6 months a year, away from his family, running his dealerships back home with an 8-hour time difference. He wanted the show to keep going. He believed adapting was necessary for Wheeler Dealers to survive. Those two perspectives, Ed's commitment to detail, Mike's commitment to continuation, couldn't coexist. So they split. But Mike has been consistent about one thing: there was no feud. In a podcast interview, he said, "There was no feud, there was no split-up, there was no disagreement, there was nothing. A guy left his job, that's it. A guy was working one day, and the next day he went, 'Do you know what? I'm going to do my own thing.'" Ed himself, in his second video addressing the abuse, acknowledged the strain. Is he my favorite person right now? Probably not, and I know for sure I'm not his. But that's okay. We're adults. We'll get over ourselves. We'll get past this, and we'll be fine. The problem is that nuance doesn't survive on the internet. The fans who loved Ed, and there were millions of them, needed someone to blame. And because Mike stayed with the show, he became the villain. It didn't matter that Ed had been talking about leaving for years. It didn't matter that Mike had stood beside Ed through 13 series and hundreds of builds. The narrative became, Mike sold out. Mike chose money over integrity. Mike betrayed Ed. And once that narrative exists, it's almost impossible to kill. The show continued. Ant Anstead came in as the new mechanic. He lasted 2 series before leaving when production moved back to the UK. Then came Mark Priestley, former Formula One mechanic known as Elvis. The show kept going. Mike kept going. But every single new series brought the same comments. Every announcement brought the same criticism. Whatever happened with Ed China remained attached to Mike's name like a scar that wouldn't fade. Mike has said publicly that the last time he saw Ed was in a Paris hotel room, having a drink together. Ed needed a job at the time. Mike offered him one. That was their last proper interaction. No dramatic fallout. No shouting match. Just 2 blokes whose paths diverged. But the internet doesn't want that version. The internet wants heroes and villains. And Mike got cast as the villain. The scam. Mike Brewer has spent his entire career teaching people how to avoid getting ripped off. And then it happened to him. 2024, July. A white Volkswagen Golf Mark 7 GTD shows up for sale at one Automotive Mike's dealership in Warwickshire. Fair price, just over £10,490. Good condition. The listing goes live. Interest comes in quickly. Then a buyer rings, says his name's Gary, wants the car straight away, can't come down to view it in person, wants to arrange for his own courier to collect it. He'll pay over the phone. Now, if you know anything about car scams, alarm bells should be ringing. Remote sale, no viewing, courier collection. But here's the thing, this kind of sale happens all the time. Buyers live hundreds of miles away. They can't make the trip. As long as the checks pass, there's no reason to refuse. So Mike and his team did the checks. Driving license looked legitimate. Bank details matched the invoice. Card payment went through. Everything appeared normal. The sale was confirmed. The courier showed up, took the Golf, drove away. Job done. Except it wasn't. A short time later, Barclays, the card provider, contacted One Automotive. The person whose card had been used to buy the Golf was contesting the payment. He said he didn't buy a car. He'd never heard of One Automotive. His identity and card details had been stolen. Someone had used his information to commit fraud. That meant the buyer, Mike, thought he was dealing with Gary never existed. The money that had appeared cleared for the sale was now being reversed. The bank wanted to refund the real owner of the card, the victim of identity theft. And that left Mike and his business with the worst possible outcome. The car was gone, the money was gone, and the fraudster had vanished. Mike was furious, not just because he'd lost over £10,000, but because he had done everything right. The checks were carried out, the documents matched. The steps the industry tells dealers to follow were followed carefully, and none of it had been enough. In an interview with Car Dealer magazine, Mike said, "This is not unique. We've found out that this has been happening time and time again to several dealers up and down the country where they've been scammed in the same way. It has put us off remote sales. Our business cannot suffer a £10,500 loss. We just don't have that kind of profit in the business." Mike also had a go at the police response. He reported the fraud, gave them all the details, and they basically told him they weren't interested. He said, "The police don't want to know. If a car is caught doing 33 in a 30, it will be found by our constabulary, but they simply don't care." I'm sorry to say that out loud about the UK police force. Here's the kicker. The car was eventually recovered. Someone in Scotland had bought the Golf on Facebook for £7,500 cash. When they tried to register it, the car was flagged as stolen. Police turned up, impounded it, and returned it to Mike. But by that point, another person had been scammed by the same criminals. The lesson Mike took from it: if you're selling a car remotely, make absolutely sure the customer is there in person with ID you can verify face-to-face. Google their address. Check everything. Because the fraudsters are out there, and they know exactly how to fool the system. This wasn't some minor hiccup. This was a man who had spent decades in the motor trade. A man who had taught millions of viewers how to spot a dodgy deal, getting caught out by criminals who had perfected their craft. And the worst part? It's just one more weight on a pile that had been building for years. The burnout. Here's what Mike Brewer never says on camera. He missed his daughter's childhood. Wheeler dealers looks like a dream job. Travel the world. Buy interesting cars. Fix them up. Sell them on. Get paid to do what you love. And for a long time, it was exactly that. But somewhere along the way, the dream turned into a grind that Mike couldn't escape. By the time the show moved to America, the workload had become relentless. Mike wasn't just presenting, he was managing his dealerships back in the UK. Mike Brewer Motors had been running since 2012, while spending 6 months a year in California. 8-hour time difference, constant flights, hotels, airports, tight deadlines, long days on set, followed by evenings spent trying to keep his businesses afloat from another continent. And all of it came with a cost that didn't show up on screen. In interviews, Mike has been painfully honest about what he sacrificed. His daughter Chloe, his only child, turned 22, and Mike had been home for only a handful of her birthdays. He said it himself. He went through entire years where he slept in his own bed fewer than 10 times. Think about that. Fewer than 10 nights a year in his own home. The rest of the time, he was somewhere else. Working, filming, traveling, missing everything. Mike described it like this. She'd grown up seeing her father on screen, but rarely in person. While cameras rolled and deals sold, I found myself missing family moments I could never get back. The show demanded everything. Every time he stepped in front of the camera, he had to look sharp, sound enthusiastic, be ready to pull off the deal. Backstage, he was battling exhaustion and absence. He watched other families celebrate while his own moved on without him. The work stopped being a journey and became a fight for survival. Burnout doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it's just the slow realization that life has moved forward without you. For Mike, that moment arrived after years of running at full speed. He looked back and understood how far he'd pushed himself. The show had given him a career that millions dream of. It had given him recognition in the car world. It had changed his life forever. But it had also revealed what a high price looks like when passion becomes constant pressure. Mike now knows the value of balance. He knows that no success is worth losing the time you should have spent with the people you love. He's been public about the toll it took on him mentally. The death threats didn't help. The abuse aimed at his family didn't help. But even without all of that, the sheer relentless grind of keeping wheeler dealers alive while managing businesses on another continent would have been enough to break most people. And yet, he kept going. Because that's what Mike Brewer does. He keeps going. Mike Brewer Motors shuts down, the dealership that couldn't survive. November 2nd, 2025. After 15 years, Mike Brewer Motors closed its doors. 60 jobs lost. And Mike had someone to blame. The announcement came via a statement posted on the dealership's website. Short, direct. After many successful years in business, we have made the difficult decision to close Mike Brewer Motors. We would like to extend our heartfelt thanks to all our customers for their loyalty and support over the years. The dealership, based in Sheffield, had been run by Mike and 3 other directors in a joint venture. It wasn't a one-man show. But when the costs became unsustainable, the decision was made to wind it down. Mike didn't mince words about why. He blamed the Labour government. Specifically, he blamed taxation. In an interview, he said, "The onus is on the business owner, and the market out there is really strong for competitiveness. You need to be really keen on your pricing to be able to sell high-volume cars like we do out of Mike Brewer Motors. We've taken the tough decision that we're going to have to wind that business down. We can't keep it going. We're losing money, and it's all due to the government and what they've done recently with taxation." The closure came at a time when UK businesses were already under severe strain. A quarterly report by Begbie's Trainer revealed a 78% jump in the number of firms in critical financial distress. 55,530 companies in the third quarter of 2025, compared to the year before. Experts warned that the upcoming autumn budget needed to deliver urgent support to avoid a wave of failures, particularly among small businesses. Mike Brewer Motors wasn't the only casualty, but it was a high-profile one, and the internet, predictably, had opinions. Some sympathized. Some said Mike had sold out by moving wheeler dealers to America and was now paying the price. Others pointed out that dealerships across the country were struggling under the same pressures. But here's what the closure represents: 15 years of work, 15 years of building something outside of television, 60 people who had jobs and now don't, and a man who had already been carrying more than most people could handle, now carrying the weight of that closure as well. Mike still runs One Automotive in Warwickshire, the dealership where the fraud happened. He's still dealing, still negotiating, still helping drivers find the right car. His daughter Chloe works there. His wife Michelle is actively involved. It's become a family operation. But the Sheffield closure is a reminder that even someone as experienced and well-connected as Mike Brewer isn't immune to the realities of running a business in a tough economy. So what really happened to Mike Brewer? He survived. That's what happened. He survived the split with Ed. He survived the death threats. He survived the scam. He survived the burnout. He survived the dealership closure. And he's still here, still working, still trying to prove that he's not the villain people decided he was. Whether that's enough to change anyone's mind is another question entirely. What are your thoughts about Mike Brewer from Wheeler Dealers? Share with us in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel. For more interesting stories like this, be sure to click on the next video that pops up on your screen. You never know what you'll discover next.